Greetings everyone. Welcome to another Sunday School preview for Sunday, June 1st, 2025. This Sunday's dialogue looks on the book of Job with emphasis on the topic Job loses everything. The story of Job is a profound narrative about faith, suffering, and divine justice, illustrating how the righteous man Job endured immense trials without losing his faith in God. The central truth of this week's lesson highlights how the Christian in the midst of trial can still worship and serve God. The focus examines Job's loss of family, possession, and health, yet still determined to worship God in every circumstances. The lesson, as usual, also sheds light on the evangelism emphasis, telling us that trying times offer an effective window to share the gospel with unbeliever. And of course, the golden text. And Job said, "Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord had taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Now, brothers and sisters, as you delve into the introduction, you will see information emerging about the historical account on the book of Job, including a question being asked: why do good people suffer? Job had 3 friends who offered shallow response to his question, which never got answered. However, we will learn that it is in human plight the believer ought to trust the wisdom of God in spite of one's suffering. Job suffered, and in his suffering he lost everything, but he trusted the Lord. Now, in this week's lesson, 3 focal points are highlighted. The first one is the devil questions Job's faith. Acting in his role as a persecutor, Satan challenges Job's integrity and declares the only reason Job is faithful to God is because God acted with partiality toward him, protecting him and blessing him. Satan challenges God to stretch his hand against Job. Now, this is not simply a challenge for God to withdraw protection and blessing from Job, but for God to act against him in violence and judgment. Satan is convinced Job's devotion to God is dependent on God's favor on him. And God's favor on him. And once that favor is removed, Job will curse God. And surprisingly, the Lord agrees to Satan's challenge. He permits the satanic adversary to attack Job's family and possession, which brings me to the second focal point. The second focal point of this week's lesson. Job loses family and possession. So the first focal point in this week's lesson speaks about the devil questioning Job's faith, and the second one talks about Job loses family and possession. Now, with God's edge of protection withdrawn from Job, Satan begins to attack Job. Job loses his livestock, servants, and family. This focal point will help us to understand also that Satan was given the authority to use nature as a weapon against Job. Verse 16 of Job 1 says, "The fire of God is falling from heaven." Now, the lesson will teach us that while Satan was the instrumental cause of Job's suffering, he was not the ultimate cause. Job's elite financial status was completely eroded, and with the death of his children, the possibility of a future heir was gone. Now the richest man and most powerful person in the ancient Near East had been reduced to a helpless pauper. Now, this brings us to the final focal point of this week's Sunday school lesson. Job responds to his losses. Now, his response was with a higher wisdom that acknowledges God's sovereignty. Job responds to suffering, challenges the simplistic notion of retributive justice, and invites believers to trust in God's character and purpose, even amidst trials. His account affirms that suffering is not always a direct result of personal sin, and that faithfulness to God can coexist with expression of doubt and lament. See you in Sunday school this Sunday.